Thank you all for waiting out. I hope it was worth the wait, worth the suspense. My name is Tina De La Fay. I live now in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is the ancestral unceded land of the Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi peoples. I work from an infrastructure that was made possible by the forced labor of the enslaved Africans and their descendants, many of whom are still experiencing the impacts of that violence. Thank you for having me here today. I work for an organization, a nonprofit that focuses on more anti-racist, liberatory, academically rigorous schools, and we do that by working directly with teachers, but we also work with school leaders and district leaders so that the supports that they need to have in place are there and the schools have enabling conditions so the teachers and other people at the school can do the work. But I was born and raised here in South Florida. I've been a teacher in Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties. I was also a literacy coach at a couple places, and I had a brief stint as a school counselor. I use she, her pronouns. And in 2016, I'm proud to have been the Goodson National Educator of the Year finalist. Not the winner. I just want to say too that I have this eye allergy that just happens about once a year, and apparently today's the day. So I woke up in the middle of the night and popped like all the pills I could find for anti-inflammatory. So if it turns out like the scene in Hitch and you see it, we'll let you know. Just wait at me. I'm planning to go to the urgent care right after this, but I gotta back down to normal size-ish. So yeah, just let me know, and hopefully we can get through the next 2 hours. But thanks for being here. It's beautiful outside, and I know we had some technical difficulties, so thanks for being here with me today. Are you advancing, or can I do it from here? Okay, great. Okay, so let me go over some outcomes. I feel like this group is intimately involved with this, so I'll present this hopefully in a way that still is able to challenge and prod your thinking. But how is LGBTQIA plus justice connected to racial equity? Where I work in Grand Rapids, Michigan, it's a lot different from here, but I think even all over, people see these as separate issues. Even people who are people of color or people who are queer think they're separated. And I hope that you leave today with a specific action to create more inclusive schools. So that could look like a school in Florida or Georgia where you know what is within your agency to enact, or it could look like a school in Chicago or sometimes Michigan where you have an inclusive policy, but it's not living out on the ground, and how you can make that, bring that to life. And I hope you do leave here feeling empowered as an accomplice in the fight for more equitable and liberatory schools. And then just to give you a little bit of framing, I do want to make sure we're on the same page around intersectionality, build some context. I think we've been doing that all weekend, so we'll go through that pretty fast. And then I'm going to give you a really short overview of a framework of those ways that you can create more inclusive schools on your own or with a partner or with a team. And then we'll actually look at a case scenario if we have time to see how we can apply this framework to an actual situation. And like I said, there's a call to action at the end. And I get excited, I start talking really fast. I was talking to Danielle King yesterday at lunch, and I literally choked on my food for like 5 minutes because we got excited, and I was talking too fast and forgetting to breathe. So just yell out, slow down. Or you can do the sign language, just if you want to give me a little hint, slow down, get too excited. And then I would also say too, I want to invite you to interrupt, because a lot of times facilitators ask you to assume best intentions, and that really protects the oppressor over the oppressed, and it's really impact over intention. So if I'm saying something that's racist, heterosexist, ableist, something that aligns more with dominant culture, I need to be educated, and I'm hoping this is more of a dialogue. So please interrupt me at any time if that is happening, because I see all of these, every time I present is a chance for me to learn more. Blind spots, you don't know you have them. That's the thing about blind spots. Okay, this is a really educated and experienced room. So let me just ask you real quick, how do you define intersectionality? I'm not to put any pressure on you, but I think we all experience this.
The concept of having multiple overlapping identities.
Thank you, yeah. So I'm going to just ground today in the definition from Kimberly Crenshaw, how a person's various social and political identities combine to create different modes of discrimination and privilege. So for me, it's a mix of being cisgendered, lesbian, multi-ethnic, Puerto Rican. We could go on. This is not an exhaustive list. But I think it'd be fun if everybody just calls out some of their intersectionalities that they're comfortable with all at the same time. So go.
Queer.
Call it too.
Yeah, we could be here for a minute, right?
That's fine.
And then we have a lot of our identities that are hidden as well. So for instance, I have low vision, and people don't always realize that. But if I'm sitting at the front of the room, it's because I need to see. If I'm sitting at the back, it means I really don't care about your presentation. Because I don't be able to see. Just kidding, or maybe it was just full. And so, yeah, I just want to give credit again to Kimberly Crenshaw and the work of the Kambahi River Collective, who did all that work even before her on that topic. Okay, so speaking of intersectionality, I do want to make sure that you have that as your censoring framework for today. 42% of queer people do identify as people of color. You might have a student in mind right now that you're thinking of, so maybe you'll center that person as you move through this seminar right now and through the rest of the day, I hope. Okay, so we are not doing Kahoot because I do not trust the tech in this environment. So, I have some teachers in the room. Well, that makes me excited.
It's
fine,
fun,
yeah.
so if you want to do,
Yeah, I feel like the tech guys are not with us, so we'll still do something.
Simulation of what happens in the classroom.
Right?
We don't have to get that anymore.
Yes. So I'm really excited that y'all know about Kahoot. Yeah, if you don't know, sorry, you're not good. Catch up with me later. So we've talked about the GLSEN survey. So the 2021 GLSEN National Climate Survey found that which of the following groups experienced the highest rates of in-person victimization based on gender expression. So no, that this isn't necessarily gay or lesbian students, but specifically around gender expression. Show me on your fingers what you think is the students that experience the most.
Are we guessing which number is?
So right, like so, do white students experience more victimization based on gender identity than Latinx? Or like which number, if you think it's white students, you would put 3. If you think it's multiracial students, you would put 2. All right. Oh, I think I'll try to miss 1. Okay, we have a chat person who says 1. It actually is 1 Latinx or Latina students, and you know, in South Florida, where I grew up, that's a big issue for us here. I will say that in this year they added Middle Eastern and North African students, and those actually had the highest with indigenous populations as well. But of this group, it was Latinx students. Okay, don't want to dwell in the oppression or the violence, but I think this is a really powerful data point. The CDC found that between 2015 and 2019, Black LGBT youth are almost 5 times more likely than white LGBT youth in the past 12 months too. So once again, this doesn't include trans students, but what are your thoughts here? And if anybody can't see, please let me read it for you. Is this big enough for everyone? Is that noise up? Okay. So yeah, I should have put 1, 2, 3. So we'll say A is 1, B is 2, and C is 3. What are you getting in the chat? We're getting a suicide attempt. Saying 1, bullying. A lot of bullying. Okay, it's actually 2. And I was kind of practicing with a friend of mine. She said, no, actually, I'm telling you, it's whites and it's white. And I'm like, but have you disaggregated that data by other identities other than race? And that's where I hope we can see that there is experiences for people of color who are queer that are different than people of color who are white. I'm not telling you here, but they are 2 times as more likely to experience bullying at school, and actually 7 times more likely to be forced into sexual intercourse. Okay, so we know this changes all the time, and we've been talking about this. There's currently 188 state bills in the 2023 legislative session targeting LGBTQ rights in schools and education. So of all the bills, these are just the ones that affect schools and education. Which state do you think has advanced the most that look like they're about to become law? And I know this changes, so this is, you know, a little bit a minute ago, but 1, 2, 3, or 4, which state do you think has the most about to become law?
All of
I see a lot of Missouri, interesting. Okay, Missouri is exactly right, actually. Do you know how many bills they have right now? And this includes everything from you just using the correct gender pronouns to the bathroom issues and transgender athletes.
But it was confusing.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think they just banned transgender for adults.
Okay.
But she's like, not immediately, I think.
Yeah, no, I believe it. And these are just, like I said, just bills that target specifically students in schools. Anyone want to guess how many they have on, how many bills are on the docket about to become law? No. Right, it's interesting. 17. And so for those of you who picked Texas, they were close behind with 15. Florida has 6 right now. Alabama has 0, but does that mean it's an inclusive state? They just already passed a lot of laws there. They have already become law. But I know we hear a lot about Texas and Florida, but it's you know, important to say it again.
Is it just the Florida and Texas are louder where Missouri's kind of
Maybe, and we know Texas and Florida have already passed bills, and so I think this is setting a trend. Now other states are coming behind, going, "Oh, we can do that, and we can enact even more than Florida and Texas."
set the precedent.
Yeah.
I also think that like politicians in Texas and Florida are like seeking more of like national recognition, like they're trying to make a name for themselves. Versus like the governor of Missouri is not trying to run for president.
Yeah.
You know, so
What? DeSantis is running for president?
what?
No idea.
You know, so I think like he's purposefully like trying to stir the pot because like, he wants
being
to
louder.
get, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, all of that makes sense. I got just one more, and I do want to focus on the positive here. So the negative is that about 16 states have enacted curriculum censorship laws that prohibit teaching about race, gender, or LGBTQ plus communities. But in the good news, there are states who are doing the opposite. So how many states have vetoed, overturned, or indefinitely stalled bills on curriculum censorship? And once again, this is from a minute ago, but it'll give you a general idea. How many states are saying we're going the other way? We're not going to ban quote unquote CRT. We're not going to tell people they can't teach about queer visibility. Okay, I see 6. It's actually so good. Okay, it's actually 14 states are going in the opposite direction. And it's surprising, right? Because as far as states that have blocked quote unquote CRT, critical race theory bans, like there are a number of states that saying we're not going to restrict teaching about truthful and racial history. There's some states like Alaska, Kansas, Michigan, and Ohio. And then states that have curriculum standards that require actually that curriculum affirms the visibility of queer communities. Of course, places like California are predictable, but there's also places like Colorado, Illinois, Oregon. And so then we have states that are obviously prohibiting these things in law. So, you know, you have Florida and Georgia, but surprising states are on that prohibition list, like Arizona, New Hampshire. I think of New England as being somehow more progressive. And that's not necessarily the case. But there are currently 17 states who are trying to enact bills that would expand education on racism and bias. So a lot of states are deciding to move in the right direction on this. Okay, so we know that this is the problem. But here's the solution. We've been talking about that all week. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. This is data, if you've been here, that you've seen. Students do say that teachers and principals who are allies to them make all the difference in the world. And you've seen this graph before, and almost 35% have more than 10 at their school. And at least 5% have one. 5% have at least one, and only 4% have none. But that 4%, of course, is very important. And what's interesting is people do mention their teachers and school counselors as primary source, but librarians are very high on the list. And do we still have our librarians here today? And I know in Michigan, we've had some censorship bans and censorship and book bans, and the librarians have really stood in the gap against that. I have a really great bookstore called Betty's Pages. She has stepped in with the schools and provided books when they've gotten banned. But there are also school nurses and principals who are on the list. Not surprisingly, school resource officers, which we'll just name school police, and athletic coaches were obviously lower on the list. And there's a very problematic issue that occurs when you have a school resource officer on your campus. So that's highlighted in this survey if you really dig into the details. Okay, so if we know this is one of the solutions, how do you leverage your role, whatever that may be in your school? So this is just the overview of a framework. They give you 4 steps: educate, affirm, include, or interact. And I've given some examples here of what they might look like. Like I said, this is a short overview of it. But really, education starts with the other adults in the building who are the decision makers and controlling what's happening in that building. So that's one way to look at it. Affirm could look like anything from just using the correct names and pronouns to providing gender neutral bathrooms or reframing dress codes, right? Include, obviously, we're centering those people who have been traditionally marginalized, and interrupt is when you take that moment. It could be a teachable moment. We talked about that earlier, and speaking out. So let me actually just find a partner. Do you tend to lean into one area more than the other? And in the past couple of years, as the climate has become more hostile, have you shifted toward one way or the other? So I'm gonna eavesdrop, if that's okay, as you're talking. I just want to hear what you're saying, and we'd love to hear what the chat. Do you lean toward one area more than the other?
I want to be more.
Can you put the water bottle over here? Thanks.
Do you have an example of a situation that you think of just on just nothing comes to mind. I know. The way that I doing all the things.
Anything in the chat? I love that you're talking so much. I'm so excited about this.
Good. It is great. You must be familiar with Wilton Manor, which is not very intersectional at all. You got to sue.
Right, yeah. If you can hear me, want to do more. 2 times if you can hear me. 3 times, sorry. I will come back to this, and I'm going to give you a slide deck where you have it. Okay. So we're already getting close to time. So I was going to do another group, but we'll kind of do it whole group and do it a little bit quicker, but I want to give you a scenario that is very similar to something that happened to someone I know. And it's, have you all familiar with the work of Paul Gorski? So it's a kind of a mix of two things. And I want to ask you, as you look at this, is this a safe situation where you might educate, include, inform, or interrupt? By the way, there's no wrong answers. And I really want you to think about your agency in this. And so that could look like, what is within my sphere of influence? Like, we can't change international law or even maybe a district policy or a mindset of a principal. But what is your agency? And that also has to do with, what are the privileges that you're bringing in that you can leverage? So those of us who share some of these marginalized identities, we do expect those with white or white privilege, male privilege, to come in and stand in the gap with us. So think about what you could leverage in this situation. And you're going to be basically coaching a peer who's come to you with this situation. It's a case study called Two Moms. And if you want to, I don't know if it'll be necessary, but there is a QR code if you want to see it on your own screen, but I'll have it up here as well. Sorry about the lack of commas. Okay, so as an English teacher, that I'm going to loosely go over that tonight. We'll just take a couple moments to read over the scenario, and then it's about a teacher named Miss Riviere. So if she was one of your peers and she came to you with this, would you maybe push her toward to educate, affirm, include, or interrupt? And are there some things that you would focus on in the short term? And because this is not designed as a PowerPoint slide, it says, what would you focus on in the long term? So you might choose one in the moment and then one to ask her to follow up around. Okay, so let's jump in. We'll just, ay, Dios mío. That's not gonna work.
It looks good on the other one.
Okay, so if this is the QR code too, right? Is anyone not able to get into that? I'm all about accessibility. This is not the right font or anything. And because it is so bad, I wonder if I could get someone to read out from a better. All right, Jerry is going to read out. And I'm just going to put up the framework. So as she's reading, you can think about where you might go. Okay. All right, in your best teacher voice.
Case study, Two Moms. Second grade teacher, Miss Riviero, recently learned that Denise, a biracial student who lives with her lesbian moms, would be in her class. In an effort to be inclusive, she did some research on children's books that depicted families with same-sex parents. Miss R encountered two challenges. One, after pursuing more than a dozen children's books about same-sex families, she found almost none featured people of color as main characters. Two, even though the school's principal was supportive of intersectional visibility, a newly vocal parent group was seeking to ban materials on what they called, quote, critical race theory and, quote, gay indoctrination, and cited recent state legislation on curriculum to support their requests. Ms. R decided to purchase a few copies of, quote, Love Makes a Family, a book representing many different family structures and some characters of color. She hoped to avoid controversy by placing the book on her classroom library rather than using it as a read aloud. Eventually, Denise found Love Makes a Family and sat down in the reading circle. Quentin, another student sitting nearby, looked up at Miss Riviero and, as if telling on her, pointed to Denise and said, quote, she's reading a book about weird people. Okay, Quentin, Miss Riviero interrupted. Focus on your own books and let Denise focus on hers. Miss R wondered if Quentin was referring to the same-sex families or the interracial couple in the book as, quote, weird people. She was uneasy about responding in a way that might seem provocative or political, exposing her school to a lawsuit or loss of funding. She definitely did not feel comfortable trying to teach a lesson on racial prejudice on the spot to second graders, much less a lesson on gay marriage.
Okay, so in a perfect world, you'd get some thinking out, you know, and then we'd share some responses. But due to time, still think about it. But are you thinking that you would lean toward one of these as you start the conversation with her? She's telling you this happened in her class.
I've been speaking to her, so Happy to answer, but I also want to just make sure that. But I think that this is less a choice of multiple, like a multiple choice where you select one, and it's more like a circle where like one leads to the other. Because I mean, I don't teach in the classroom, so it's really easy for me to say, I'm gonna respond with a lot of rage and fire. But I would like interrupt to educate, and by educating, you're affirming Denise, and also including her and her family.
What would it look like to interrupt? What's
So-
the action look like?
Well, I would say something like, what do you mean when you say weird?
Well,
or
the moment's
when you were-
passed, she's not coming to you the next day.
Who? Which
Miss
one?
Riviero.
Oh, then I would say like, so she's telling me this story. I would say like, how did you respond in that moment? Well, I guess like.
I mean, but can't she still interrupt even if it's past? Sorry, can you tell me your name?
Jordy.
Jory, like you're nodding your head yes. How can she still interrupt after it's already happened?
Oh. I wasn't ready for all that. It's one of those of like, I think I would ask, like I would bring up the book and be like, hey, what was weird about this book? Because we're also assuming, right, that it was the component of race or that it was the component of being gay, right? We don't know because little kids are random, you know, it could just been the color of their clothes, like we don't know. So to me, it would be a conversation of like, what did you mean? Where did you come from? And
So you're
then-
gonna circle back with Quentin even if it's the next day. To maybe interrupt some thinking that's forming there. I appreciate that. I saw some librarian input over here.
He's gonna bring it up again, like he's gonna see this book and be like, oh, look, it's the weird people, and then you can interrupt him again with the questioning, like, oh, what did you mean? Books are very dialogic, so we can use that to talk about it.
Love that word.
I just want to put, like, from my perspective, sometimes I have a problem with like asking students like, what do you mean when it's kind of very clearly like causing harm and just interrupting and being direct to affirm like all I did. Sometimes when you like ask them to clarify further, they might cause more harm in my experiences.
If we have more time, I'd want to dig into that a little bit, but.
I think
Lorraine?
Lorraine, from Chicago. So I think that I would, if it were me, I would say, read the book aloud to the whole class, and then have like a read aloud, because they're second grade, right? So second graders, the teacher does a lot of read aloud and talk about, and then they stop and like talk about.
So you might start here, include.
Yeah, I don't know where that goes.
So what about her fears about we're not supposed to read quote unquote gay books? And this is a very quote unquote gay book, right? So how do you support her there?
But there's only like, how many pages is it? And there's only like one, I'm a math teacher, so there's only. The book is gay.
Do we have something in the chat? Okay. Miss Riviero's inclination right then was to lean out. Who is she protecting when in that moment when she did that?
The school.
And you can argue, okay, well, I'm protecting school. Like, let's unpack that. Are you? And if you are, what have you done to really dive into like what is allowable, what's not? Have you had that conversation with your administration? And I think that's where the educate piece comes in as well. Because there's obviously she hasn't received clear guidance from her administrators. At the end of the day, that yes, this should not have been the first time that a student experienced a gay character or interracial marriage or whatever that was happening, or we don't know why he was saying was weird. But what is her ability to just have this as part of the curriculum from the beginning so we can prevent things like this from happening? And then what can you advocate for school training so that all of the teachers and staff can know how to have a more inclusive curriculum? And what legally, like what do you have our back or not? And then at the very end of the day, this goes back to privilege, intersection, and agency. These laws will stand until somebody challenges, takes that stand, and goes up and says, I'm not okay with this. Whether that is an individual teacher or you have the support of the school administration, like who is that person? I'm not saying it's you, but if you have resources, some of us maybe do need a job to live and some of us don't have support, but if you can make that decision, where do you decide I'm going to stand up and do that?
I would say like the other thing that is important in this story that we haven't, that I don't think we mentioned yet, is like part of the issue is that this teacher only considered getting this book once she has a student in class.
To just start with that.
We should not have to wait for a certain type of student to be sitting in our classroom in order to have books or content that's inclusive.
And she just happened to know, right? But what about all the students we don't know their
Yeah.
families or what their gender identity?
So like, it's
At
good that
second
she
grade.
made that effort, knowing that that student was there, but like, we should be talking about like, people with disabilities and people with different needs and races and different
You can't
families.
wait until you know
Yeah.
and then go, oh, I should do something about that. It's got to
And
be
normalize
from
that for all of
the
your
center.
students.
The only thing that I want to mention that hasn't come up yet, some of you have probably have thought about it, is this affirmation piece. Okay, so Miss Rivera messed up in that moment. I'm just gonna name that. But let me affirm her for coming to me and recognizing that and trying to be part of this journey where she's learning what she is. So first, I'm gonna have a learning conversation with her, but I do want to affirm, thank you, so let's talk about this. Harm was done to Denise in that moment. So in my opinion, the short term is let's immediately get back to Denise as soon as possible and name, what Quentin said was not correct. I should have addressed that better. Like depending on your relationship, you're gonna have to rebuild trust with Denise because she received a silent but very explicit message about, we don't talk about gay people here. So you are now invisible to me because no matter what book we put. So yes, it'd be great if she starts by just reading the book to the whole class, but she's got a lot of work to do to go back and affirm that relationship with Denise and the other students who she might not even know about that affected. Okay, so I'm gonna jump right to the end. You guys got most of these, you all got most of these. Okay, so this is the end. I would love to hear if you have any ideas of what you can do within your agency, whether you're in an inclusive or not so much environment. And we have a Facebook page, so I'll post this on our Facebook page question, and I would love for us to continue the conversation there and share out. Like Jerry was saying, you wanted to lean more toward interrupt, but you're not sure how to always do that. So maybe there's some ideas we can share out on the Stonewall Facebook page, and that same link, if you were able to jump into the link or the bit.ly, I'm giving you some more tools. Our organization, which we're in Chicago, by the way, we have a Teaching for Equity guide that goes really deep into what are the educator beliefs that are needed for an inclusive classroom, and then what are the actions to follow up on that. Some more frameworks, and just if you want more data and information on how to create more inclusive schools, there's a lot of data information and, for instance, how to teach Black history, which they weren't allowed. Okay, so I'm going to get out of the way for the next person, but thank you all very much for engaging.